According to the philosophy of rationalism, knowledge originates primarily from reason and intellect. So, reason and intellect that exists inside of man can be considered to be primarily responsible for the production and generation of all sorts of knowledge in the world. So, without reason, without the ability to reason, and without intellectual capabilities, there can be no knowledge, and there is seriously no knowledge if we are not able to reason and if we are not able to intellectualize, philosophize anything around ourselves happening or taking place in the world. And that's why man can also be considered to be responsible for the existence of knowledge in the first place, because reason and intellect exist primarily inside of man. All these mental capabilities, reason and intellect, exist in the body and in the brain of man. And those capabilities are actually sometimes used by some men only to think critically, and that turns to knowledge. That actually gives birth to knowledge in the first place. And therefore, rationalism also proves and believes that experience cannot be the ultimate provider of knowledge, as we sometimes like to believe. Some of us always believe that experience is the ultimate manifestation of all kinds of knowledge in the world, but that is false. That is not necessarily true. Experience has always had its own limitations and weaknesses that we are not always willing to admit to in the first place, and that's why we fall victims to ignorance and stupidity, because we often rely on the power of experience by being completely aware or unaware that experience is limited and therefore cannot be the ultimate producer or generator of knowledge in the world, but rather we should look within ourselves. We need to turn to our own reason and intellect that obviously is there in ourselves, because as I said earlier, reason is the ultimate source of knowledge. The ability to reason and think critically is going to produce and give birth to all sorts of knowledge that we can possibly imagine and comprehend in the world. And that's why we should learn to rely on our own reason and our own ability to think, because that is going to provide us with knowledge that experience can never give us in the first place. And that's why a reason cannot be underestimated, because a reason has always been one of the primary factors and contributors to knowledge and its production in the world. And that's why reason should always be taken seriously, and we should always try to explore our own reasonable capabilities and intellect. We should put our intellect on test. We should actually explore our own capacity and capability for knowledge, because that is going to lead to more knowledge moving forward. And if we are always relying on experience for deriving or creating knowledge, then we are obviously going to be very limited in our depth and in our knowledge as well, because experience is limited, and the knowledge therefore it gives is also going to be limited, and experience and its knowledge will be limited in the future also, because reason has always been one of the ultimate producers of knowledge. Now, we may actually experience a lot of things around ourselves happening and taking place, but we have to rely on our reason and intellectual capabilities to transform whatever it is that we get from experience into knowledge. If we do not depend on our intellect, then we cannot convert our knowledge of experience into actual and practical knowledge. So, in order to convert or transform anything into knowledge, we have to depend on reason, and we have to use our reason and intellectual capabilities in the process, because without intellect, without reason, there can be no knowledge whatsoever. And that's why there is experience, and there will always be experience as far as man is concerned. But the thing is, we have to use our reason in the process of creating and producing knowledge, because experience is not going to give us the direct knowledge that we sometimes think it is capable of. Experience is very vague and it is incomplete also, but it is actually reason, the mind, and its intellectual capabilities that make possible all knowledge that we think is possible. So we should try to explore our reason, our intellect, because that is the ultimate capacity for knowledge. And the more knowledge we derive from experience, the more we actually must be willing to depend on our reason and intellect to process that knowledge so that we can convert it into something critical and worth paying attention to. Otherwise, there is no critical knowledge whatsoever in the world if there is no reason or intellect involved in it. So, you should actually try to use your reason and intellect that is obviously inside of you to create and produce and transform your obviously information that you get from experience into serious and critical knowledge. Otherwise, experience is partial and incomplete in and of itself, and therefore the knowledge it gives will also be partial and incomplete. And that's why you will have to rely on reason and many different mental capabilities to actually actualize and realize the knowledge that you want in your life. And without critical thinking, there is no knowledge. Experience is just a vague platform from an individual perspective, but real knowledge becomes possible only when we are willing to think, and real knowledge comes into play and existence only when we are willing to think and doubt at the same time. And again, doubt is also another very important contributor to the production of knowledge in the world, because when we doubt, we think, and when we think, we obviously are able to create something, and that is called knowledge. And that's why doubt, reason, and intellect, all these faculties and capabilities play an indispensable role in the creation and production of knowledge in man and in the world. And that's why you have to actually rely on your own mental capacity and intellectual capabilities to explore and create knowledge by yourself without depending on anything or anyone whatsoever. Now, we cannot afford to depend on education system, religious institutions, and governmental organizations to provide us with some serious knowledge and critical thinking, because government and its bodies and organizations as education and religion can never provide us with, and they will never give us any access to any sort of critical thinking and reasonable stuff, because that way they are going to be exposed by the knowledge that they choose to give to the people in society. And that's why religion, education, and government always believes in the promotion of that knowledge which is obviously inferior, useless, and worthless to the life of man and in general also. So we have to create knowledge by ourselves by depending on our intellect and by exploring it, by actually navigating and exploring our intellectual capabilities, so that we can create and formulate our own knowledge by ourselves, our own wisdom, our own attitude, etc. And character integrity are obviously there. So we cannot afford to depend on experience or on governments and other organizations and institutions to provide us with knowledge, because they don't, for the fear that we are going to revolt against them. And that's why we have to and we must try to create our own knowledge. We must try to create knowledge by ourselves without anxious dependence on anything or anyone. And that way, rationalism will be complete when we are able to depend on our reason and intellectual faculties for the production of our own knowledge in the world, because that is what rationalism advocates.